Hi everyone, it's William with the Grand Duke Dmitri 1917 Diary Series, and we are today up to the penultimate section of the long diary entry of October 29th. That is the old style calendar, the Julian calendar, that was still in use in Russia, I believe, and that Dmitri was at any rate still using. It was already November, I think almost mid-November on the Western calendar, the Gregorian calendar. Okay, so our recap, Dmitri was continuing to think about whether there was any possibility at all that the Bolshevik takeover could be a good thing, and whether it could be something like an abscess, a boil that burst, releasing all of the septic blood and material and getting rid of it, and then allowing for healing. So that was the best case scenario, but he was also afraid that the amount of damage that the Bolsheviks would do in a short period of time would be so profound that it would take then major reconstruction, and Russia would not be soon returning to a stable government, and in fact, there would probably be a civil war. All right, so let's dive in. In this section, he's broadening his perspective to the war on the Western Front, but also zooming in on what was going on around him in his immediate environment. So here we go. With regard to the Italian catastrophe, there is nothing new as yet, exclamation point. One can only paint a clearer picture for oneself of the defeat of the Italian army. Interestingly, according to official information from the English government, the catastrophe occurred thanks to the reluctance of the Italian troops coming into the Second Army to attack. Apparently, this reluctance can be explained by the incredibly strong German peace propaganda aimed at the rank and file of the Italian army, propaganda that produced such stunning results. According to Austrian information, they seized around 106,000 prisoners, guns by the hundreds and machine guns by the thousands. Yes, exclamation point, a great service to Italy by the Russian Revolution and Russian democracy. The international press is taking a relatively calm view of the state of affairs in Italy, although of course it doesn't hide that the center of gravity has strongly shifted. France and England are sending troops who have apparently already arrived there. It's been decided to merge the Italian front with the French and form a general command under a military committee made up of representatives of all three armies. The cabinet will include General Cadorna, who has yielded the command of the Italian troops to another general whose name I do not recall. Now a few words about the state of affairs here in Tehran. As it happens, things are not going at all well. Everyone is waiting for a revolution or some kind of uprising here because a horrible famine is on the move. There are already fights between the police and the people at bakeries. Bread has gone up in price terribly. The government is taking some action, but not nearly enough. The government has little money. I myself have witnessed stormy scenes at bakeries. Marling, who is far from an alarmist, nonetheless believes that revolution or a major uprising is inevitable. He even let slip that he thinks the Shah and the Qajar dynasty will be deprived of power this winter or in the coming year, exclamation point. It's hard for me to comment on that topic because I know nothing about Persia. I don't think that it will blank be. Okay, so with that illegible word in that last sentence, it's hard to know what he's saying. Is he saying that even though Marling believes that he doesn't think it's actually going to happen, even though he knows nothing about Persia, which he quite readily admits. Okay, so incidentally, the general whose name he has forgotten was Armando Diaz, and he was taking over from Luigi Cadorna. Okay, so what I'd like to do. So I thought today, since I know so little about this and have not so much time for looking into it, that I would cheat and ask Perplexity AI to please assess the accuracy of Dmitri's writing on these events. And so they provided me with a great deal of very helpful background information, which I won't go into, but here's the overall assessment of accuracy and perspective. Okay, and I'm quoting the AI. Taken as a whole, Dmitri's entry gives a strikingly good first draft of history for an observer in Tehran relying on British and Austrian reports in the press. He has the scale of the catastrophe, the massive prisoner haul, the Allied rush to send troops, and the imminent restructuring of Allied high command essentially right. And his sense that the defeat shifts the war's center of gravity is borne out by later analysis. Where his information diverges from later consensus is mainly in the weight assigned to German peace propaganda and rank-and-file reluctance as the decisive cause. That reflects the interpretive frames and political needs of late 1917 rather than the full tactical and structural diagnosis historians now offer, and it dovetails with his own tendency to read Allied military crises as downstream effects of the Russian Revolution's demoralizing example. Okay, so thumbs up to Dmitri. He is doing a good job in his assessments. All right, now going on to Tehran. I did the same thing, and here is a brief summary of what the AI said. Where Marling overshoots, as Dmitri records, is in his timing. The Shah and the Qajar dynasty were not deprived of power that winter or in the coming year. Ahmad Shah Qajar remained nominally on the throne through the end of the war. The dynasty's effective displacement came later with Reza Khan's 1921 coup and the formal end of Qajar rule in 1925. In that sense, Dmitri's own skepticism, it's hard for me to comment, ... I don't think that it will, ... turns out to be closer to the actual short-term outcome. The famine produced serious unrest and delegitimization, but not an immediate revolution in Tehran in 1917 through 18. Okay, so it's interpreting, it's guessing that Dmitri's final comment, the one with the blank word, is actually him second-guessing Marling and saying, no, I don't think that's going to happen. Of course, Dmitri did have some experience of what it's like being in a country where revolution is imminent. So maybe he didn't, get the same vibe as he had in Russia when he'd embarked upon the Rasputin assassination in late 1916. But anyway, I have here, just as an interesting kind of sideline, this very good book, very dry academic book, but fascinating information, and you probably couldn't see that. Here's the title page, Famine in Russia, 1891 through 1892 by Richard G. Robbins Jr. Some of you will recognize that date, 1891. So Dmitri was born in the midst of a horrible famine in Russia, a horrible widespread famine. So, when I read this about, not that they're related, but when I read this about this what turned out to be a really horrible famine in Persia from 1917 to 1918, it made me think of that for what it's worth. Okay, so some interesting things. It's interesting that Dmitri notes here that according to official information from the English government. So is that information that he got courtesy of Sir Charles or, a secretary at the legation? Was it considered classified information at all? I'm probably not classified, but whether it was widely distributed, we don't know. Anyway, I find that interesting. There were potential issues of espionage with an active duty Russian officer being there at the legation, from both directions. Dmitri could have been getting privileged information from official English governmental sources, and on the other hand, Marling and the other staff at the legation could have been getting interesting information from him, and certainly an interesting perspective on what was going on in Russia. Okay, and you know, all of this for me just really cements the fact that I've mentioned several times of my impression that Dmitri was not only a keen observer, but a careful observer and an astute observer, and had a genuine interest. I've used the phrase before, the chess player's interest in taking a step back and watching how things are unfolding and analyzing them. So, I see that as something to his credit and something that confirms that he was an intelligent man and a serious man, despite his compulsive vices that lead people sometimes to assume that he was just an empty-headed bon vivant and hedonist. Okay, so what do we have next time? Well, we are going to finish up with the long diary of the 29th of October in what would be a pattern for Dmitri of starting out by talking about politics and current events, and then ending with his personal life. So he's going to be talking about two pressing personal issues, one being that of gambling and money, and things had gotten worse for him. I won't say more about that. And also that things were getting more tense between him and Lady Marling, and the awkwardness of that situation. So quite interesting. And yeah, those of you who have been primarily interested in his comments about these major events that were taking place, what the heck, come and hear a little about the personal stuff. Anyway, it never hurts to realize who the person who's providing analysis and commentary actually is as a human being. All right, so I hope to see you next time. Bye.